is on their feet. Here's the windup and the pitch.
Strike three, you're out.
In 1869, trains were becoming part of daily life in Corinne, Utah. But one arrival in October of that year was unequaled for the Queen City of the Great Basin. On board there were hardwood bats, hand-sewn leather balls, and finely tailored uniforms, luggage for the barnstorming Cincinnati Red Stockings, and a new game known by two words: baseball.
Baseball comes to Utah at a pivotal time in the history of baseball. At the time of the American Civil War, it was not at all clear whether town ball or the New York game or the Massachusetts game, all bat and ball games, which one of those was going to be a dominant game. After the Civil War, baseball, the New York game, catches on. It comes to Utah as part of the western expansion of the country, and it also comes to Utah at a time when the game itself is undergoing very rapid change. So we have baseball in a frontier community and a frontier game that's developing. So baseball develops with Utah.
The early games were unrefined, raw-boned helter-skelter events, much like the rough-hewn men of Corinne. The fields where they played were cut from a sagebrush rug on the outskirts of town. Few knew the rules, and the scores routinely soared into double digits. But there was something wondrous about this game, an enchanting seduction that withstood dust and disarray out on the plains. Corinne, like other towns, organized a baseball club. They played teams like the Junctions from Ogden, North String, Box Elder, and the Pioneer Baseball Club. Within a year, the self-proclaimed Gentile capital was challenging its neighbors to the south, the Salt Lake Aeneas, to a 3-game territorial championship.
The Gentiles in Corinne wanted to prove that, by damn, they could beat the Mormons, and the Mormons in Salt Lake, had to continue to prove themselves as the toughest in the territory. They played on July 4th in Corinne. Back in 1870, July 4th in the territory of Utah was referred to as Gentile Day, and Corinne won that game. On July 25th, which was Monday because the 24th of July was on a Sunday, and of course the Mormons would never celebrate Pioneer Day on a Sunday, the Corinthians came to Salt Lake City, and the Salt Lake team, the Aeneas, beat the Corinthians, which led, of course, to the final game. And the Corinthians beat Salt Lake. There was heavy betting on it. It was a major festival, it was a major event in the territory of Utah to have this first territorial championship. And so the very origins of baseball, or at least the popularity of baseball, really centers on Mormons and non-Mormons from the very beginning in Utah.
Hard hit ball way out, and it's a foul ball.
Corinne won the deciding third game by a close 12-8 score. But this rivalry was to start on a bitter note. The Aeneas refused to congratulate the victors and snubbed the traditional post-game dinner. The Corinthians celebrated anyway.
Utah was regarded nationally as a place inhabited by some very strange people who were polygamists. Embracing baseball, which by the 1870s was being promulgated as the national pastime, was a way of Utah and Utahns demonstrating that they were in fact part of American national culture. We were different, but not that different. And also in Utah, I think, as evidenced by the Corinnes and the Aeneas in the territorial championship of 1870, baseball, sport generally, but baseball in particular, was a cultural common ground where Mormons and non-Mormons, who rabidly in many cases contested with each other in the marketplace, in the political arena, and so on, got together and competed with each other.
More than 100 summers ago, a warm breeze, a big blue sky, and a new game found another home. Utah shook hands with baseball. One way cities could modernize late in the 19th century was to build department stores and organize baseball teams. In Salt Lake City, stores sprang up on Main Street, and two very special teams were in the making. The Deserettes came first. They seemed invincible, beating most teams by huge scores. On the team, Phil Margetts Jr. His father, Phil Margetts Sr., was a well-known actor Brigham Young had enjoyed seeing in local theater. But despite sterling performances by the Deserettes on the field, not everyone was happy. Deserette was synonymous with Mormon. Some people didn't like that. One fan cited three well-known Mormon symbols in a letter to the newspaper. He wrote, "You might as well have an apostle be the pitcher, an all-seeing eye on the ball, and holiness to the Lord written on the bat, as be called the Deserettes."
What happened is that the Deseret Baseball Club's board of directors immediately fired off a letter to the Salt Lake Herald, which was owned by Mormons but was in the Mormon, anti-Mormon kind of fray, was as neutral as a newspaper came in 1877, and said, "It doesn't matter what religion you are to be on the baseball team. We're all good players. We like to play. We go out and have a good time. Doesn't matter." And said, but in the meantime said, 5 of our players are Mormons, and 5 of our players are non-Mormons, 4 of our players are Mormons, and most of the fans, most of the cranks supporting the Deserettes are non-Mormons. Well, then 2 of the guys who'd been classified as Mormons wrote a letter to the Salt Lake Tribune saying, "We were associated as Mormons. We don't want to be. We want to be associated with the non-Mormon element on the team." And then one of the directors said, you know, he liked the Mormons okay on the team, but the sweeping statements of the board of directors were just way too broad. And in fact, you know, they liked Mormons on the team okay, but Mormons and non-Mormons didn't mix real well in society.
The bickering took its toll. The Deserettes split up. 4 on the team, 2 Mormons and 2 non-Mormons, joined with some local all-stars to form the Salt Lake Red Stockings. Salt Lake City now had 2 crack teams and a rivalry for the ages.
They had to have a championship series. I mean, the old Deserettes picked up the best other non-Mormon players in the valley. The Red Stockings had all the best Mormon players, and they decided upon a championship series. And now you have growing Salt Lake City, you know, what is it, 20,000, 25,000, wanting to be the most up-to-date modern city in the West. And so everybody's got to come out and watch the game and be proud of their teams. They have a parade down Main Street to Washington Square, where the baseball field was. That's where the city and county building is now.
A rambunctious crowd sees the best baseball ever. The first championship series goes to the Deserettes 2-1 over the rival Red Stockings. The city was now captivated by these 2 teams. Both played other teams from Laramie, Cheyenne, Denver, and Omaha, but nothing came close to their season-ending neighborhood series. The following year, the Red Stockings acquire a good second baseman named Heber J. Grant. In the much-anticipated championship series of 1878, the Deserettes win the first game, but the Red Stockings come back and win game 2.
The Deseret News and Salt Lake Herald always complained about the boisterous West stands, which were the cheaper seats, where the people who got in for a quarter and drank and yelled and screamed and probably said bad words, and, as opposed to the East Side, which was far more civilized. There were women. They wouldn't call them women; they'd call them ladies, which the newspapers always trying to get out to the game to civilize the game. And so you have this enormous game. Everybody turning out. Everybody's got to watch it. Everybody's betting on it. The honor of the Mormon Church is on the line. the honor of everybody who's opposed to the Mormon churches out on the line, out on the baseball field. And the Red Stockings win. Heber J. Grant could talk about it till the day he died in the 1930s when there's an article in the church magazine about him. What do you see? You see a picture of the Red Stockings taken in 1878 with Heber J. Grant sitting in the middle among his teammates.
The Deserettes and the Red Stockings luster eventually wore off. Attempts to form a Western League failed, and the Deserettes, stoked with professional players, once again became unbeatable. The Red Stockings lost their last series to the Deserettes and disbanded. As sudden and dispiriting as a rainout, the golden age of baseball in Salt Lake City was over. For the mostly rural state of Utah, word about baseball spread like news of a bumper crop. The small towns embroidered the game with their own brand of patronage. Ballparks took shape in neighborhoods, pastures, and in the shadows of the Mountain West.
Before young people had to work on the farm or go put up the hay, or they between first and second crop or first crop and wild hay, and before they harvested, every day they'd go play, boys and girls. And, you know, if you had 4 or 5 of you, they'd play 500, where one boy would toss up the ball and hit it, and you got 100 points for a fly ball, you know, 75 points for a 1-hop, 50 points for a 2-hop, 25 points for a grounder. Or if you got 7, 8, 9, you'd play workup. And if you got up to 14, then you'd divide up, you know. And they probably played without too many fights, you know, and you'd throw the bat up and do the home team routine, and I think just the whole sense of people being involved in something together that wasn't necessarily organized, wasn't necessarily perfect in its form, that you didn't have to throw anything at umpires or accuse umpires. The kids called their own balls and strikes, and you know, occasionally there'd be tempers, but they'd be back there the next day.
When the Great Depression hit Utah in the 1930s, it hit hard. In 1933, the per capita income was $300, just 80% of the national average. 35% of Utah's workforce was out of a job. Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, known as the CCCs, worked wonders in the state, building dams, planting trees, improving ecosystems for plants and animals, and organizing baseball teams.
This here is the CC uniform, Company 3241, and we received them uniforms in 38, 39, about 39, from Captain Siebert. That's the first uniforms that we ever got in camp.
When Bo Montella came west from Brooklyn, New York with the CCCs, he brought along his love for baseball. CCC teams like Montella's played other camp teams and town teams throughout the Four Corners area.
National Lead was a company that was in the uranium business in Monticello, and we worked in the uranium mill in Monticello, and we formed a baseball team there, and it was called National Lead. Our town team baseball was our what do you say, our pleasure, our get-together, you know. Everybody come out to see a baseball game. It was just the fellas in town, and it was what they produced themselves. You know what I mean? It was just a great sport. It was a good entertainment, and when we played ball against each other or other outside team, everybody in town come out. We played darn good ball. They had a good tournament and a good league in Colorado, Dove Creek, Goodman Point, Cahoon, Colorado, and Moab, and we had some real good times there.
The CCC helped keep Utah's economy alive, training many young men and leaving countless reminders of their work. Campsites, bridges, even some trails are still used today. and Utah's brand of baseball in the desert Southwest also still thrives thanks to the start it got from guys like Bo Montella. As trains brought America together in the early 1900s, black people found themselves in communities they simply had not been in before. And in the days before integration, clubs like the Porters and Waiters in Salt Lake City served as a gathering place for black people, a dance club, a social hall, and where blacks could dream about the game of baseball. A team called the Salt Lake Tigers was among the first. In later years, the Porters and Waiters team. These all-black teams played baseball in a quiet, inglorious manner, but it left a lasting impression on many youngsters.
I watched these players come out of their cars, and of course I hadn't seen an all-black team play baseball. And I was inspired and really thrilled to see these people come out there to play baseball. And they showed me a good brand of baseball that I'll never forget.
It was not easy for young blacks to find a team to play on. In fact, many never played organized baseball. But long after the Salt Lake Tigers disappeared, another black team was formed, the Salt Lake Monarchs. Inspiration came in a good place, and often on Sunday.
We would get out on the field, and of course most of us had been to church. And there was one verse that I remember very well. I don't think it's in the Bible, but it's a verse that has good meaning. That is, praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Black congregations sometimes passed the hat and helped their team barnstorm through a season. The memories were worth it.
Oh, when Willie Stewart and Johnny Ellis would knock one out, it was a big thing. We certainly enjoyed it. It was a Sunday activity that give us something to do every Sunday afternoon after church. Was the baseball games at the old municipal ballpark.
Well, the nearest I can remember, I can think that we was out in Midvale playing one Sunday, and I knocked a home run, and I think they're still looking for the ball.
At first, they had a look of shock when we got out of our vehicles to play ball. And they started talking among themselves. And I heard statements there like, well, can you believe this? Said the whole team's black. And I heard others say, well, this is the first time I've ever seen a black man.
We played out in Tooele, had played a game on a Sunday afternoon. And after the game, Red Del Papa was their manager of the Tooele team. He said, come on, fellas, and take them to my place. He had a club. And it was, he served beer there, and more or less a bar. Like. So he marched us right in. We went right in, and there were some customers sitting there. And when they saw us come in, you should have seen the shock on their faces. They couldn't imagine what was going on. This was a segregated area at that time, and there'd never been any blacks in Red's bar drinking beer. And Red came right in and says, set them up, give the fellows whatever they want. Give them whatever they want, put it out there for them. Everybody sitting, the people there just sat in shock for a while. They couldn't believe it. But being the kind of guy Red was, says, if I can play ball with them, they're good enough to drink beer in my place. And he didn't go up to anybody and ask him if it was okay if we came in. He came right in and presented himself as, hey, this is my bar, these are my friends, and if you don't like it, you can leave. Nobody left, nobody said anything.
A game of baseball, a gesture of kindness. Red Del Papa's recipe for happiness. No wonder he's known as Mr. Baseball in Tooele County.
Of course, there were times when somebody would make some kind of racial slur, but you see, there's something that gave me an uplift. And I used to recite this to my team members. Many and sharp, the numerous ills, inwoven with our frame. More pointed still is man's inhumanity to man. And this gave us all a lift. We said, yes, we have to go play ball now. And we would play ball.
We was pretty good.
Pretty good ball club,
Yeah,
I bet.
we was pretty good. The one year there, we were so good that we challenged the Salt Lake Bees, but they wouldn't play us. We said, you know, the money would go to charity or something like that.
Is that
We just
right?
wanted to play them,
Yeah, that's right.
and they wouldn't play us.
I went down to Denver and played with the White Elephants. I played about 3 games with the White Elephants there.
We had uniform made out of, I don't know what you call that stuff, cotton sack, good seamstress, but you couldn't tell that we had yellow shirts and it was white pants. And then we had socks, and we used to take regular shoes on, buy cleats and put on them. We weren't able to buy no real ball shoes.
It gave us a little sense of pride, you know, that we had, you know, something that we all reflected into, we all related to. And it was a lot of fun. We met a lot of guys, you know, we'd have never seen if we had to come up.
Very memorable, very good times. Probably the best time of my life. Very enjoyable, yeah. Nice bunch of guys. Too bad more of them couldn't have been here.
Perhaps the most intriguing story of black baseball in Utah is also the most mysterious. It's the little-known story of a team called the Occidentals. They took to the diamond for one unusual season back in 1909.
As far as I can determine, all of their games were played against white teams. They played smelter teams in Salt Lake Valley and mining teams out in Juab County and a team in Payson. Payson, that's about as far south, I think, as they journeyed. They played teams from Park City.
And they won most of the time. On the roster, old Warhorse Harrison, pitcher and right field, Dude Langley at catcher, Gans over on first, and Hargrave in left.
Okay, batter up.
With the newspaper charting the Occidentals' unlikely saga, they kept on winning.
It got to be in September, and there were several teams. The Heber City team was one that was claiming that it was the state champion. Well, naturally, the Occidentals disputed that, and so finally on October 3rd, with the weather sort of deteriorating, the final game was played, and the Occidentals won, and the Tribune at least declared them to be the state baseball champions.
When I was growing up, black athletes, for the most part, were shown in a real narrow light. Very seldom did you see black athletes with their families and things like that. They weren't portrayed as family men.
Black baseball historian Phil Dixon points to the only known photo of the Salt Lake Occidentals as one possible clue to their success. Pictured on a downtown Salt Lake City street, the Occidentals were gathered around Jack Johnson, the first black to be crowned heavyweight boxing champion of the world.
Jack Johnson was probably a threat to white people. To black people, he was a great motivator in showing what you could accomplish, showing what you could overcome. The average black person did not get their photograph in the newspaper for being in sports. He was a hero that exceeded anything that black people had ever known to that time. And he was certainly their hero, and I think a lot of people latched onto the dream.
As amazing as the 1909 Occidentals were, they became an obscure footnote in history. The team dissolved, the players moved on, their season of gold buried in the past.
And if this good luck don't leave me, I'll let myself away.
Peanuts, popcorn, hot dogs, right up. Get them while they're here.
Fly ball out to left, to deep, and it's gone. Home run.
If Walt Borla had his way, every kid would play what he likes to call the great American game of baseball. Born in a coal camp, Walt had to sneak away to play. His immigrant Italian father, a hardworking stonemason, used to ask, "Are you going to eat that baseball?" Jobs, you see, gave immigrants a place in America. But baseball gave them a taste of America.
It's a diverse population, people living here of all ethnic backgrounds. They came here to work in the mines, to work on the railroad. Italians, Greeks, Spaniards, Slovenians, French people. We just had all kinds of people here. I think it originated, the real interest originated in the coal camps. Each coal camp was proud of their baseball team. Sunday was a big day. There was a ball game somewhere, either in the coal camp where they had their own ball fields or here, Price, here in Helper. Helper seemed to be the center of the baseball activity. The coal camps competed against each other for the talent that came in here. They gave them jobs at the mines. Usually they got a better job than they could get anywhere else, and they played ball for the coal camp.
There's some from Japanese team when they were over here. The Japanese put their names on there.
This cardboard box of baseballs is like a summertime storehouse for J. Bracken Lee. Lee played the blue-collar baseball Carbon County offered. He competed at shortstop, second base, catcher, and in the outfield.
I hate to say this, but it's the truth. I played on teams when there'd be people who would throw rocks at you if they're close enough. Yeah, the people that were watching, they'd get their head up about it. And sometimes they hurt. I know I went to pick up a bat one time because they were laying out on the ground. And you pick up the bat, and I said I had time picking the bat up because there was 2 or 3 rocks coming. I loved the game.
I see out there on that field many good ball players and how they love the game. Most of them have passed on now, but the memories are all over this park.
In many ways, Frank Zacharia's story is everyone's story. His baseball journey is the American experience. Born to immigrant Italian parents in Helper, Utah, saddled with the strains of poverty, and enduring the competition of Utah's Ellis Island in Carbon County, little Zach found his way on a baseball field.
I had to hit my way to make the team. They just put me in there one time just to say, go ahead, you can hit while I make this lineup. When I went up and hit, I hit the ball so damn far out of the park, they had to speak my language from then on because I did hit. I had to play well or I would never have a chance.
The Orange Crushers was Zacharia's first team, but he soon played his way onto the Helper Merchant squad. Frank Zacharia could hit towering home runs, and since his family lived just beyond the outfield fence, the crowd often would chant, "Show 'em where you live, Zach," and once in a while he'd swat one over the fence. Baseball also taught this Italian boy some ugly lessons. Once his team unwittingly positioned a young black catcher in the batter's box, against a pitcher from the South.
When he said, "Sure, go ahead, Andy, go up there and hit him." And this pitcher from Arkansas, when Andy walked up there, the first 5 pitchers, Andy had to pick himself off the ground. The 6th time, Andy got up, went home. And that pitcher was really reprimanded for the way he acted. And right to this day, nobody will know what good a player that Andy was, because he was a good player, but he never had a chance. There were quite a few blacks around there at Carbon County at that time. There were good ball players, good pitchers, good everything. They wouldn't even walk in the ballpark because they weren't welcome.
Frank Zacharia's dream nearly came true. Playing for the Helper Merchants in Ogden one day, little Zach hit the circuit, a single, a double, a triple, and a home run. An impressive showing witnessed by one of baseball's best, Ty Cobb.
But I met Ty Cobb. He asked me if I'd like to play professional ball. I told him, being that young, I said, I don't know whether my mother let me or not. But he said, oh, yeah, she'll let you. I'm sending you down to San Francisco to play baseball.
What happened next, Frank Zacharia has never lived down. Though he had been discovered by Ty Cobb, he still had to leave home and prove himself. A big, faraway city, suffocating pressure, a kid totally out of his element. Little Zacharia never took his swings. He got on a train and went back to his sanctuary in Utah.
I wished I'd have had some help. I wish that these people would have said something like, hey, you son, hey, kid, come over here. You had a contract? Let's look at you. And pushed me along. Maybe I'd have been able to do something like that, but nobody asked any questions. The manager, the coaches, the trainers seemed like they were all too busy.
No one knows how many Frank Zacharias it took before major league clubs started grooming the players, letting them adjust, and allowing assimilation into a new environment. But Frank Zacharia went on to play plenty of baseball in the Industrial League for Kennecott. He eventually became a company supervisor. And whenever a new employee was hired, Frank Zacharia made sure they learned his comforting definition of safe at home.
The parents felt like, well, they came from the old country. They just felt like that, you know, they had to be doing something which was going to bring home the bacon to the household, so to speak. So a lot of these kids had to sneak away to play their baseball. But as they progressed and were successful playing in high school or playing on an American Legion team and maybe even the college, the biggest booster that was there was perhaps their parents. There was nobody else that would be there to boost them any bigger, any higher levels than their parents themselves when they become accustomed to the baseball that was part of their lives.
And of course, when you line out a baseball field, you got to set up the batter's box, line it out, line your foul lines all the way out to the corners of the field, and it gets kind of expensive if you're buying lime or if you're buying this other material that they sell at the sporting goods stores and at the hardware stores for lining fields. And in the mines, they use a product called rock dust. It's a floury type material, much like lime, and what they use it for is to settle down the coal dust in the working areas of the mine. And of course, this material works out real well to use it on the baseball fields to line up the batter's box and line up to the foul lines out to the foul line corners, you know, left field and right field.
Baseball and coal camps, still together after all these years. The Japanese who grew up in America learned the dance on the diamond. They didn't just watch the game of baseball. The University of Utah entertained touring Japanese teams in the early 1900s, and in mining camps like Magna, Garfield, and Arthur, first-generation Japanese started playing baseball. By the early 1930s, Utah had a Japanese baseball league of its own.
We were only about 18 years old, but no one else will organize it, so some of the younger people got together and organized the league, made up the schedules, and we had a summer baseball program going. And we would play a home-and-home game, and with 6 teams, that would be 10 games a year.
And we played with Soric Nippon, and Murai Taiyo, and Ogden Nippon, Honeywell, Syracuse, and the Sunset team that we played. Then we had a pretty good friendship with them. We got into argument now and then, but that's just over, all friendly.
The Western Barbershop was owned and operated by the Misaka family along Ogden's colorful 25th Street. It was a town hall for Japanese people in the 1930s and the 1940s, a gathering spot for jawboning friends, and where local boys came to get $1 from Ben Misaka if they hit a home run. He wanted the next generation of Japanese to discover the American game of baseball.
Japanese people don't show their affection too much, but the thing I remember is that he took me by the hand, walked hand in hand to the ballpark, and that kind of struck me because Japanese, first generation particularly, did not show affection physically that much. But in going to the baseball game, he showed his affection to me just by that measure, because I can still feel the grasp of his hand taking me to the game as a little boy.
Behind the barber shop, the electric alley, a glimmering boardwalk of businesses, and a brick wall to practice throwing a ball.
That was my only playground that I had. As we grew up, even we used to play in cow pastures. There's no facilities that we're used to. Today, equipment, we had very little. Beat up old mitt, even used my so-called beat up mitt in the championship games I played for state high school championship.
Born amid the rage of World War II was Executive Order 9066, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's directive that sent more than 110,000 people of Japanese descent to internment camps and relocation centers. Topaz, just north of Delta in Millard County, was Utah's sequestered center. Life inside Topaz quickly became a testimony to survival. A general store, gardens, and farming, and baseball all became part of life on the windswept Utah desert.
The players that were there were some very competitively good ball players, mixed with a bunch of amateurs too, but they, again, I think the interest in baseball that would derive from the first generation people that the Niseis there learned carried through, because that was their recreational activity. They did an awful lot of that, playing with surrounding towns, teams.
Far from Topaz in the open desert was another Japanese camp, this one stowed away in the Wasatch Mountains. The Keatley Farm Co-op, home for more than 100 Japanese. Their arrival was greeted by deep snow and a dynamite blast ripping through their compound. But they stayed on, encouraged in part by Mormon farmers and their own grit. They raised crops for the war effort, and they played baseball games with other town teams. But it was to be a short season. Keatley became a ghost town. The seeds and roots of the colony disappeared. Baseball in the mountains became a lost treasure. But the dowry of Keatley and the essence of the game lives on.
And we think that baseball was a very important factor in keeping the family and the communities and small towns together. And we feel we've lost something when we lost that type of life that we experienced then. We kind of miss it now.
Later this afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here at the Carbon County Ballpark, want you all to come out to watch the ladies play ball. That's right here at the Carbon.
Early in the 20th century, coal was king in Utah, and so was baseball. Women's teams, sponsored by coal and mining companies, were springing up everywhere. Baseball was part of life in a coal camp.
I think almost everybody in town came, really. And then, of course, the other camps came with their team, too, to help. We had a ball, well, you know, a place to play ball there. And they had a lot of seats there, too. And they were filled up, and there wasn't room for all of them. They'd have to sit in their cars and watch from their cars. And it was so funny, those women. It was just like a three-ring circus watching those women play. And of course, we tried to do our best. While we weren't that good, we enjoyed playing. And I think they all felt the same way. They did their best. Some of it wasn't so good, but they did their best. And I really enjoyed sports. I always did.
The birth of her first grandchild was announced in Sporting News magazine. The Queen Bee, as she was fondly known, was Mrs. Enid Cosgriff. And for a stretch of 4 seasons, she owned and operated the Salt Lake Bees AAA baseball club. Inherited from her husband, the late Walter E. Cosgriff, she was the first woman general manager of AAA baseball.
Because the tone was set by baseball enthusiasts, both the press and the public, I was received very, very warmly from Mr. Franks on down, and I couldn't complain at all of the real old fans. Where I fell down was in getting enough new fans to pay their way into Dirks Field, which I took 4 years trying.
From the beginning, Mrs. Cosgriff did her homework, literally, like during Major League draft meetings in Cincinnati when she declined a baseball owner's party invitation.
I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I simply cannot do that." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I have to go to my room and do my homework. This is all new to me, and I have to read and study, and this drafting, for instance, is a maze to me." And he went and told all of the other owners, "I extended your invitation, but she said she couldn't come, she had to do her homework." And that followed me all through the 4 years of baseball, and it saved my bacon. Because if I had started going to parties and being frivolous, I would never have lasted the course that I did.
During 4 years under Mrs. Cosgriff, the Bees had up and down seasons. But the tough part of the game, she found, was not losing 3-2 on a late-inning homer. It was losing a player like catcher Lou Holdener.
When the Cubs let him go, it was at the end of one of the seasons here in Salt Lake City, and he came in my office, and here he is, a man with either 3 or 4 children, and wanted to know what I could do for him. Could I hire him independently? I had to explain to him what was going on, what the situation really was. And however, one of our big supporters who owned a trucking line hired Lou, and he had a second career in trucking. I don't mean actual driving, I think more in the supervisory. And he went ahead and raised his children, and later at the Cosgriff School at St. Ambrose Parish, I handed out 8th grade diplomas to several of his children, and we remained very good friends.
In the 1940s and 50s, Wilma Swenson was one of the best fast-pitch softball players in the country. She tossed an incredible 45 no-hitters, set home run and strikeout records, and played 11 seasons with the Utah Shamrocks. In 1947, the Shamrocks were matched with a world champion team from New Orleans. The game went 13 innings at Dirks Field. It finally was called at midnight because of curfew. Wilma struck out 7 batters. The game ended in a scoreless 0-0 tie. But there's one hit Wilma says she'll never forget.
But at the time, I was expecting my first baby. But no one knew it except my team. And I remember a ball came straight back to me, and no one knew whether I got my glove up in time to catch that ball or whether it hit me in the stomach. And my team all called, time, time, and they all, from the outfield, they all came running in to see if I was okay. And of course, I guess the fans thought, what kind of a prima donna is this? But they were a good team. The fans were real receptive, and I think they liked the idea of us being women. I think they liked the idea of us going. We had to go to the field in heels and hose and a dress, and I think some of the girls probably never ever wore them except then. And then we had to shower and leave the same way. We had to be ladies, and I think they liked that. But I think they liked too. Seeing that we could play ball too.
You know, then you didn't realize it. You know, you didn't realize, you just were playing. You didn't realize that that was a good deal, or you could have made something out of it, or just like when Mr. Henniger told me if I'd play for him for 1 year, he'd put me through business college and guarantee me a job. Could you beat that? No, I didn't. I liked the girls I was playing with.
Late in the baseball season back in 1923, a young infielder playing for Seattle in the Pacific Coast League impressed scouts enough to get a try in the majors. The youngster played 25 games for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Spencer D. Adams, or Sparky, had become the first known Utah native to play Major League Baseball. Before his career was over, Sparky was roommates with Lou Gehrig, poker pals with Babe Ruth, and was slashed by Ty Cobb's spikes. Once the door was open, it stayed open. Native Utahns, players who called Utah home, those who played in Utah, and those who had ties to the state could be found in the Major League box scores.
Joyner, left-handed power hitter, picture-perfect swing, batting .470. Well, the sun's shining right now, feels good. There goes the runner, the ball's lined into center for a solid base hit. Hey, they're going to challenge him and go for third, and he'll make it easily. In fact, no throw. Head first.
Between players who grew up here or went to college here or played minor league baseball here, it's a very long list. BYU has an excellent track record of sending players to the major leagues, particularly their teams in the 70s and early 80s, and guys who became World Series heroes like Dane Orge and Jack Morris come to mind immediately. And even though Seattle did not have great teams in the early 80s, their minor league system was quite strong, and a number of players came through here, such as Harold Reynolds and Danny Tartabull.
This is Willie Mays, and this is the guy that makes managing easy for a manager. This is the greatest ball player I ever saw play. He could do it all, run, hit, everything, and he made it easy for me.
Herman Frank spent much of his life in the major leagues. He played 6 years with the St. Louis Cardinals. He played for the old Brooklyn Dodgers, the Philadelphia Athletics. He coached under Leo DeRocher, and then had successful managing runs with the San Francisco Giants and the Chicago Cubs. But his love for baseball came long before all of that, right here in Utah.
In those days, you went to school with your glove buttoned to your belt, and every chance you got, I went to Fremont in those days. We used to go over to Pioneer Park, and we'd play every day over there, and we'd flip a bat and choose up sides. And that's the way it started. We didn't have this supervision that they have today, Little League and all that. We just went out and played. And we'd challenge one neighborhood to the other and ride all over Salt Lake City on our bikes and play ball.
Franks caught a no-hitter for the Dodgers with Tex Carlton on the mound. It showed his knack for handling pitchers, something the great Branch Rickey recognized.
And he kind of told me about that he thought I should get into the managing end of it, so that was encouraging, so that's when they started.
Did he tell you what it would take?
No. Well, he always thought I was a pretty good catcher and handling pitchers and intelligent enough, so I guess maybe that's what he based it on, was being able to manage.
Herman Franks never won a pennant as manager with the Giants or the Cubs, but 4 straight second-place finishes with San Francisco rank him among the best. And his well-known feuds with the umpires may be rooted in that desire to reach the top.
Well, I think he was probably right at least half the time. You know, the umpires, they make mistakes too. And I think what made him mad is an umpire wasn't bearing down.
They knew that when I come out and kicked, I had a kick coming. I never come out there and really kick for nothing. But I guess I was kind of tough on umpires. But I know when I see them now, they tell me how much they miss me.
It's interesting, when I met Herm, I had never seen a baseball game in my life, and all I knew was about Joe DiMaggio and something about 3 strikes, you know, and you're out. But so I had to learn from scratch. I had no, knowledge of it. Herm was still in San Francisco and finishing up the season, and I had to come back here with the children to get them back in school. And an anniversary was coming up, so I thought this might be something that he might enjoy having. So I set them up and painted them, and it was just something I thought would be special for him. It's always been there, a part of something I've always wanted to do, and I've enjoyed doing it, but it's always come after we've traveled and come home and done all the things we had to do in baseball.
Pirates lead by 3 runs. The score is 5-2, and with a 3-run lead, Vern Law is pitching superbly.
It's glamorous, you know, and it's an American pastime. Thousands and thousands of kids have the dream of making it to the big leagues and playing, you know, and very few of them realize that dreams for many different reasons.
In the Yankee 8th with the
Plenty of people have heard of Vernon Law. With the Pittsburgh Pirates, he won the Cy Young Award, pitched in the 1960 World Series the Pirates won, and later on brought his son Vance into the game with great success. But few people know how Vernon Law's dream was born. It all started in Payette, Idaho, when a lawyer who would later become a senator saw Vernon pitch brilliantly. He called a friend in the Pirate organization who was also a famous singer. Pittsburgh was in the race to sign Vernon Law.
I had probably about 9 or 10 different organizations want me to sign with their particular club, but they all come in making a very bad impression as far as my folks were concerned. You know, they just didn't present themselves well. They were smoking cigars, and my dad, being very staunch, said, "That can stay out, or you can come in." And but Babe Herman, who was a scout, and also Herman Welker, who later became the senator of Idaho, they were there. They came in. They had a box of chocolates and a big, nice bouquet of roses for my mom, and then halfway during the conversation, the phone rings, and on the other end of the line is Bing Crosby. And so what are you going to do, you know?
Guy'd take a wild swing at a ball and try and hit it a mile. He'd holler, "Hey!"
Show business would also play a role in Fred Sanford's baseball career. He would never forget his scheduled appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Ed Sullivan says, "We have an interesting guest with us today." And I thought, here I am. Arthur Treacher. Do you remember him, the old butler? "Will you stand up?" And he stands up and he yaks back and forth with him. They run out of time. And I didn't get on. So after the thing was over, this guy that was wanted me to do it. I didn't get paid for it or anything. He come over and started apologizing and everything, and he says, "Well, I'd like to have you come up and meet Ed Sullivan." I said, "I don't give a shit whether I meet him or not." That's just the way I felt, because I had some people down at the hotel that were watching this thing because they friends of mine, and here I am embarrassed completely. And that was me in New York. Every time I turned around, something was happening wrong.
Fred Sanford's New York experience was bittersweet. With the St. Louis Browns, he had been a workhorse. but the team was always in the cellar. With the celebrated Yankees, he pitched less, struggled some, and the press soon labeled him the $100,000 lemon. His pitching style had always worked well for Sanford, but the Yankee coaches started tinkering.
I'm not known as a wild man. I struck out 154 and walked 77, which is a pretty good ratio, 2 to 1, you know, and that's acceptable. But he kept monkeying around with me and kept trying to get me to change, and I was so screwed up, so to speak, I couldn't throw the way I wanted, and I didn't have as much on the ball, and as a result, I was getting belted around pretty good.
Sanford did play a role in the Yankees' exciting pennant race in 1949, winning his final 3 starts, including a big win that kept New York close to the Red Sox. In all, he played 3 years for the Yankees, 2 championship rings, but not a single appearance in either World Series.
Whenever he is given an interview, they always mention the fact that he's a Mormon. They don't mention the fact that Joe DiMaggio is a Catholic, but whenever they talked about Fred, they'd always put that little tag on, that big Mormon from Utah. For some strange reason, Fred used to joke about it and say sometimes they left out the second M and call him that big moron from Utah.
Take me out to the ball game.
Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. We'll just root for the home.
Salt Lake City briefly toyed with the idea of professional baseball in the early 1900s, but when the city finally landed a team in the Pacific Coast League, the community grew up. Baseball shined in the city for several years.
Well, it's pretty remarkable to think back on the attendance they had at that time. Now, obviously, they didn't average the kind of crowds they drew for opening day, but in 1915, they had 10,000 people at Majestic Park for opening day, which was the first AAA PCL game played in Salt Lake City, and they remained in the PCL through 1925, and so that was kind of the start of the major minor league era in Salt Lake City.
The 1919 Salt Lake City Bees team finished in a lukewarm 3rd place behind Vernon and Los Angeles, but this season would be vilified for other reasons. 3 reasons: Harl Maggart, Bill Rumler, and Gene Dale, all former Major League players and teammates on the Salt Lake Bees. In a sinister plot, the trio stung the league by throwing games, taking bribes, and bragging about it. Late in the 1919 season, the Bees lost 9 of 13 games to the Vernon Tigers. Vernon would go on to win the league crown and a Little World Series title. Some of their cash winnings ended up in the Bees' pockets.
A year later, in August of 1920, which is about the time the Black Sox scandal broke, a detective who had been following around Harl Maggart saw Babe Borton give him $300, and the scandal hit. And the PCL reacted immediately on the rumors and investigated. All 3 players, Harl Maggart, Gene Dell, Bill Rumler, were all kicked out of the league and banished for life from organized baseball, just as the 8 Black Sox players were in the Black Sox scandal. And the interesting thing is that in 1920, when the scandal broke, Harl Maggart was leading the league in batting. He was hitting .370. Bill Rumler was hitting .355. The Bees were in 1st place. The scandal broke in mid-August, and the Bees ended up in 5th place in 2nd division, with 2/3 of their outfield missing and the team spirit broken. And it wasn't too long after that the Bees left Salt Lake for Hollywood.
Salt Lake City needed a hero. They found one. No one was sure how he spelled his last name, but the crowd knew how to get him going. "Push him up," they would yell. "Push him up, Tony." And young Tony Lazzeri did just that.
As a shortstop, Lazzeri may be the biggest name to ever play in Salt Lake City based on what he went on to do. He's one of 2 former Salt Lakers in the Baseball Hall of Fame, the other being Lefty Gomez. And Lazzeri really put up some incredible numbers in the 20s. For example, in 1925, he batted .355 with 60 home runs. A couple of interesting things about that era. Number one, the incredible number of games they played every season. There was a stretch there in the 20s where they played as many as 200 regular season games a year, so perhaps his numbers are a little inflated that way. Plus the fact that they were playing at the time at Bonneville Park, where the fences were quite short, about 325 feet down the lines and 360 to center field. And so it takes away a little bit from the 60 home runs, but certainly great numbers to look back on.
When I first came to Salt Lake and operated the concessions, it was entirely different than it is now. In fact, on peanuts, we'd buy them in a 100-pound sack and hand load the sacks, and believe it or not, they were sold for 10 cents, along with ice cream for a nickel, soda water a dime, and a good hot dog for 15 cents. I guess they call those the good old days.
Art Teese certainly knew how to sell hot dogs. The Lennon sisters were among his many customers. A good hot dog, some entertainment, and baseball was part of the Teese formula for success.
And I felt that my contribution to the community was providing good, wholesome entertainment in the form of sports. And over the years, I feel that I've accomplished it. And the fans have always been first with me, and I've tried to be on a close basis with them where they felt easy and say, "Hey, Art, how are you?" And I'd answer and I said, "Bill, you weren't there last night. Where were you?" And it developed into a good relationship over the last 55 years, and I feel very blessed and lucky.
Blessed and lucky. That's a horse you'd want to bet on. That was Art Teese. Literally from peanuts, he built a baseball empire. For decades, he kept the game going in Salt Lake City. The Bees, the Gulls, the Pioneer League, the Pacific Coast League, all have Teese stamped on it. He made the average Joe welcome at the ballpark, and he blended a night of baseball with the spirit of the community.
One of the authorities of the Mormon Church called and said, "We'd like to have a luncheon for the baseball team at the top of the new office building." And heavens, I was amazed. And I had some of my blacks who refused to go at first because the church then had some philosophy which they felt was against them. But I sat down and I said, "Fellas, you're doing it for me. You're not doing it for the church or anything else. But you should feel honored that they're doing it." Everyone went and everyone came back amazed. It was heartwarming.
The Trappers have won 28 in a row. The final score, Trappers 13, the Pocatello Giants 3, and what a pitching performance.
Sports writer Grantland Rice never heard of the Salt Lake Trappers when he penned his immortal words, but the ragtag team of overachievers that nobody wanted heeded Rice's words all the way into the Baseball Hall of Fame. In late August 1984, the Salt Lake Gulls were cruising through the dog days of summer in first place in the Pacific Coast League when the plug was literally pulled on the team. Unpaid bills had been stacking up. Finally, financial troubles forced the league to take over the club. Once the season ended, the ball team was sold to owners in Calgary, and Salt Lake found itself without a professional team. But a veteran baseball scout named Van Schley would change that. Like a conductor looking to put a band together, Schley traveled the country collecting free agent ball players. And like hungry musicians, these guys wanted to play.
What amazed me about this team is just you have a group of guys in unusual circumstances and how they responded. You've got a bunch of guys who were rejected or let go or just never were able to make it with any other organization. They get put into the rookie league here, which is basically the bottom of the barrel, and all of a sudden they find themselves in the middle of a win streak, and this team just gelled. I had never seen anything like it. It was an amazing story.
The season was barely a week old on June 25th, 1987, when the Trappers knocked off the Pocatello Giants 12-6. They wouldn't taste defeat again for a long, long time.
6 games into the season, I find myself on a team that keeps winning and winning and winning. I've got friends from around the country saying, hey, we're hearing about you guys in the USA Today. All of a sudden, people are beginning to pay attention to this Trappers team. 1 minute, I'm a guy in a booth about this, in a broadcast booth about the size of a phone booth doing rookie league baseball. The next thing I know, I'm sitting next to a writer from Sports Illustrated as my color man because he's here to cover our baseball team. That was an amazing thing to me. I couldn't believe it.
Wins over Pocatello, series sweeps of Idaho Falls, Great Falls, Medicine Hat, Great Falls again, 5 in a row, then 10, then 15 straight wins. And everybody's hearing about the Trappers. In Pocatello, the Trappers were down 9-3 in the 6th inning when the Pocatello Stadium announcer made a game-changing error.
We weren't really nervous yet because this team had made comebacks before, but all of a sudden the PA announcer goes, ladies and gentlemen, the streak is over. Pocatello leads 9-3. And this is right before the inning started, and I kind of glanced at my color man and I thought, oh boy, now he's made them mad. And the first thing, James Ferguson comes up in the next inning and boom, home run. And suddenly the next thing you know, the Trappers come back big time. They scored, they had an 8-run 7th inning. They scored 2 more in the 9th inning and went on to win 13-10.
The Corsicana Oilers of the Texas League had set the record back in 1902. The Baltimore Orioles of the old International League tied it in 1921. And it was fitting that Pioneer Day, July 24th in 1987, Salt Lake tied the record of 27 consecutive wins. Then playing to a full house at Dirks Field, the Trappers set themselves atop all of professional baseball.
Good looking straight 3, and the Trappers have won 28 in a row. The final score, Trappers 13, the Pocatello Giants 3, and what a pitching performance by John Grennert.
The Trappers would extend their record to 29 by sweeping the Pocatello series before finally losing an 8-4 game to the Billings Mustangs on July 27th.
For this team, a team that had never even been able to get up to Double-A, none of these guys had seen a lot of success in the pros, this was our World Series. This was the most amazing thing. They knew this was more than a championship. They knew this was history. And they knew someone would have to really do an incredible job to really knock them out. I think this might have been, and you could talk to some of the other players about it, but I know this was the highlight of their season. This was more important than them winning the championship, which they eventually did later on in the year. This was it.
After the season ended, several of the ball players had their contracts bought out by major league clubs. A few made it as far as AAA ball, but none of the record-setting Trappers ever played an inning in the majors. The record only stood for a few years. The Santo Domingo Blue Jays strung together a 35-game win streak to open their 1992 season. But for those amazing Trappers, it wasn't winning or losing. It was how they played the game.
My dad goes to the ballpark to think. Baseball, he says, fills the soul. I'm beginning to see what he means.
It started with a bad pitch. Leland Hackey was playing for the Red and White Stores against the Payson Lions in the state's semi-pro championship in 1932. Leland saw the pitch coming, but he froze. The baseball crashed into his left temple. He was hospitalized for a month and not expected to live. Hackey survived and still hoped to play baseball. Aided by his twin brother Elmer, Leland figured if they could devise some sort of protection, he could play ball again without fear of getting hurt. It worked. The brothers' imagination, determination, and workmanship paid off. The result is now in the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of the first batting helmets used in baseball. Early accounts of Utah baseball in newspapers and later on radio and television gave credibility to the game and pushed it onto a larger stage. John C. Dirks, the dean of Utah's baseball writers, led the way. Dirks arranged the first unrefined accounts of the Salt Lake Bees games. As the telegraph was clicking in reports of the games, Dirks scribbled down the action, handed it to an announcer who hollered from a second-story window to anxious fans below. Later on, Old Ironsides gave fans a marquee rendition of the game.
Wonderful gentleman. He's a man that brought organized baseball back to Salt Lake City. In 1937-38, when they were talking about bringing baseball back, we'd been out of baseball for about 15 years. And Mr. Dirks was the baseball man. I mean, Les Goats of the Deseret News was also a good baseball man. The two of them were great.
So was Al Warden. A ride down his sports highway was like driving on cruise control. Characters around every corner, the bumps and bruises of sports, and who knows what was ahead in the middle of the road. His column was the best ride around. Al Warden loved baseball. Seeing his scrapbooks, press cards, photo collection, and notepads about the game is like having lunch in a long-ago diner with one of the boys of summer.
Attention all Catholic boys, tryouts for baseball to be held this Saturday at 10 a.m. right behind St. Anne's Church. Bring your own gloves.
Bishop Dwayne G. Hunt, the fifth bishop of the Catholic Diocese, knew that baseball, like good religion, inspires people and fills the soul. In the 1930s, Hunt took a Catholic baseball team to Chicago for a tournament. And in later years, he arranged a trip for his boys to see the St. Louis Cardinals and the Brooklyn Dodgers. Where we play the game probably never leaves us. The ballparks all have keepsakes for us, like a day at Dirks Field with the Clown Prince of Baseball, Max Patkin. A chicken wire backstop, tired wood benches, a field on somebody's farm, sturdy rocks down the left field line, an upright grandstand placed like a living room chair, the town's open-air meeting place, the community ballpark. Where we play the game, where we watch the game, we learn about ourselves and others.
Right two in there.
And the most beautiful ballpark in the world? Maybe it's here in Monument Valley, where the game is still played in its simplest form, where the groundskeeper has done a magnificent job. A mile or more to deep center, and no one has hit one out of here yet.
I'm a school teacher, and every time when the school started, and I asked the kids what they did during the summer, and they usually said nothing, and the summer was boring. So that's one of the main reasons why I got into baseball, because I want them to do something rather than get bored at home and do nothing. So that's one of the main reasons why I had them started this baseball about 7 years ago. Goalkeeper, good job. Good job. Okay. Bear it up. I think the instinct is there to compete, and because of the instinct within themselves, they really blend in with the baseball, and they really compete one another and batting, catching, and all the basic skills, and they really do bring all those instincts back from their native backgrounds.
Even among the stars, high above the earth, there's said to be a baseball diamond. Baseball in the heavens. It might be where Aki Evans now prances and dances, like he did long ago in the Pacific Coast League, like he did for 28 years coaching and playing semi-pro ball. It might be where he now tells his stories. Stories about a prison umpire, a train ride, and the game he loved.
Ball one, outside, too low, ball one. It's very dramatic on every pitch or something like that, you know. And we were a little bit apprehensive about those guys throwing at us, you know, but and then cussing in. It took us around. We'd go through all the cell blocks, of course, and that was quite showed us where up against that south wall where they used to stick the guys when they shoot them for killing people. What's the name anyway? Murder, for murder. Well, in those days, the regulars got to sleep in the lower berth. So I happened to be a regular at that time, so they put me in the lower berth. And it started up that toward Portland in a big full moon and sliding right along the side of that Columbia River. And I never went to sleep. I watched everything. It was the most beautiful ride I've ever taken. I think all in all, that baseball was my whole life.
Yes, I'll be playing the field from now on.
Ken Griffey Jr. for Ozzie Smith. His rookie card, All-Star. Sure. Okay.
Youngsters love to save baseball trading cards, but they'll never have a Milt Abrams. There aren't any, but there should be. His love of baseball is worth saving.
I loved to watch the pitcher wind up and uncoil, you know, like a spring, and feel that ball coming in. Baseball and softball took up, it just dominated my life, you know, until it was all over. It's a great sport. It's a clean sport. A lot of skills. I love to watch a batter come up, you know, and take his stance and look at him and signal a pitcher, you know, and guess what you can do with him. Yeah, I love baseball.
Baseball comes to us with demands. Find your pitch, watch the ball. It's only a game. But it gives people an anthem. You always get your swings. 3 strikes is still an out. There's always next year. It arrives during the cruelest time of year, when winter and spring are quarreling. We discover baseball as children. We play it, we watch it, and we dream about all the game does for us. We miss it when it's gone. But the pictures take us back. Ladies a century ago in the Cache Valley, starched uniforms on Westminster College boys, unrefined rascals among timber and brush. The Orangeville Stars of 1896. The pictures take us back. The beauty comes with knowing they all played the game. The mystery is not being able to see them play, but wondering what it might have been like if we had. Baseball is history. Our history.
Blue sky, a few puffy clouds, light winds out of the west. It's a perfect day for a game of baseball.
I'll tell you what you can do. Take me out to the boarding, take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win
is your inning.
One, two, three. Lions! I don't care if I ever get back, let me root for the whole team. If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's one.
Major funding for Lime on the Diamond provided by Cream of Weber, the dairy of choice.